strategy around that. This is just an idea off the top of my head. And then if anybody wants to jump in the hot seat and we do it for you, you can let us know in the chat. That's my thoughts.
Okay, well, I was thinking about it in terms of the fact that, everybody that signed up for the Black Experts Empire, the long-term goal obviously is, to monetize your life, monetize your expertise, take all the things, all the skills that you have and learn how to support yourself with those skills without necessarily waiting for somebody else to do it for you. So in that regard, I think, pretty much honestly anything and everything can be monetized. At the end of the day, if you do it the right way, because everybody has inherent value. And when you have inherent value, then that means you do have something that someone's willing to pay for. Whether you go and work for a company and they give you a check, or you take a skill that you have in the kitchen, or something you learned in law school and you bring it to the public, or so anything that you can imagine yourself being paid for by somebody else, that is a reflection, that is a modest reflection of your inherent value. Now, the problem is that when we spend our time working for other people our whole life, where the value is being extracted, but only maybe let's say 30%, 40% of that total value is going to you. The other 60, 70% is going toward the person that's extracting your value, and they're reselling it. They're reselling, you're going to work every day at Walmart or whatever. Your time, they're paying you $14 an hour for your time. They're selling your time, or they're making, say, $40, $50 an hour from your time. So they're getting the bulk of the value as opposed to you. And the reason is that that person has been positioned as the middleman. That company is the middleman, where they're saying, look, we can extract value from or the wealth from your inherent value, but we're going to do it because you can't do it, right? It's just like when I went to get my car fixed once, and the guy said, he told me something that it had to be done to the car, and I was in grad school, so money was tight, and it was like $500, and I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't have $500 to pay you, so I went home. I was a 25-year-old grad student, and my neighbor, it's funny, people talk about country folks as always being racist. Well, I'm going to tell you, he was about as big of a hillbilly redneck type as you ever met, but the nicest guy in the world. And I told him what was, I told him, I said, man, I can't, my car's broke, I can't afford the $500. And he said, well, what's wrong with it? What'd they say? And I said, well, it needs a new such and such. And he looked at it, he said, I can fix that for you in 5 minutes. Right? And so literally he did, and he did it for free, and it was wonderful. And what that makes me think about is that the reason that they were able to possibly charge me hundreds of dollars and extract that much wealth from me is because they had skill that I did not have, right? They had basic skill that the guy showed me. He said, next time it goes bad, here's what you do. All you do is you unscrew this and re-screw it back in. I mean, it was like that basic. But that's what happens when we don't learn how to monetize, when we don't learn how to build wealth in our households, when we don't teach our children how to monetize. That's a basic skill that they don't have. And what happens is that just like that mechanic wanted to rob the hell out of me because I didn't have that basic skill of how to unscrew this part and put it back in, he was charging me all this money. So we go through the same thing in the job market. Because we don't know how to monetize our skill, somebody else says, oh, I'll do that for you. And then when they do it, they're extracting the bulk of the wealth. So that was one thought that came to mind when you were talking. And I'm going to share this last one, then I'm going to shut up because I want you to talk, and anybody in here that would like to talk, I'd like for them to talk. But the other thought that went through my mind was when you talked about that, the big flips that a lot of immigrant groups make. Not everybody, we can't stereotype it, any group of people. But, we talked about, the house full of people, say from Mexico, was 10 of them in the house. They pool their money, then they take the excess and they use that to buy a property, and then they keep flipping, right? Because the property becomes profitable, then they can buy another one, another. Same thing, Asian family, etc. And you don't see that so much with black families, right? And what that made me think about was this. I was talking to Dr. Claude Anderson earlier today on my YouTube channel, the author of Powernomics. And let me tell you, Dr. Anderson and I were just talking about, black wealth and where it's gone in the last 30 years. And here's the first thing we found. I pointed this out on a chart to him, and we found out two things. One thing on the chart was that I said, look at this. In 1983, white wealth was 8 times greater than black wealth. And I said, now in 2017, white wealth is 11 times greater than black wealth. So we went down, right? We went backward. And he said, so I put the chart away, and Dr. Anderson says, Dr. Watkins, pull that chart back up again. And I said, okay, sure. He said, now I want you to look at the other chart on the side of that, the one I had ignored, the one for Hispanics versus whites. He said, now notice with black wealth, we went from 8 times, or white people having 8 times more than us to 11 times more. He said Hispanics went from having 10 times, whites having 10 times more wealth than them to having, I think it was 8 times more. So they went in the opposite direction from us. They passed us, right?
Yeah.
And so that what you said earlier about those basic flipping strategies of taking the resources, pulling them together, and then leveraging that into buying property. I think it's that kind of thinking that makes the difference. Because what were black people thinking about the last 30 years? We were thinking, okay, I want to get ahead, so I'm gonna work hard and go to a good college and get me a good job. That was our ticket. Right? A lot of immigrant families weren't thinking that. A lot of them weren't thinking about college and all that. They were thinking, we're going to work hard, get a good trade, and start a good business, and pool our resources, and own some property, own some land, own some businesses. And you see that reflected in the differential in wealth between blacks and Hispanics. Now, that was just literally an insight that I came to today, and I was so excited about it. I had to share that with you. And it's your fault, because you sparked all that thinking in me. I just had to tell that story. Now I'm going to zip it up.
No, it's really about going back to the basics, and we got duped. We got duped by higher education in many ways. As you know, the higher education institutions are actually preying on poor black, undereducated people to actually get them for student loans. The whole for-profit student loan industry was built off the back of black students, right? And then from there, if you do graduate as a black students are graduating with more debt. Black students are taking longer, right, to graduate. And then even after doing that, your employment rate is a lot less. So I think the way you put it, one of the times we talked, I think we were saying 300 something thousand when we looked at the true cost of college with the foregone income, and basically you're paying $300 something thousand to get a piece of paper that actually doesn't prove anything. And so we just overlook, and I think we get so sophisticated, and we try to be so much like white people who were on the intellectual capital front that we just try to skip the traditional skills and labor. But when I look at the men here, the older men in New Orleans that are finding a way to get by, this is my plumber. This is my oven repairman. This is my gardener. Like, that's how the older men here in New Orleans are getting by. Now, of course, they're doing, and they're still trading their time, but it's really a skill that they have, and they just never have the expertise to actually expand it beyond themselves. But whereas somebody who's graduating from Dillard or Xavier tomorrow, they're going to have a more difficult time in today's economy as a black college graduate than some of these older men who may not have gone past high school graduation, but actually have a skill that is needed, right? Here in New Orleans, the grass grows back quick because it rains and it's fertile land, etc. And literally, these lawn dudes, they go around and they have clients that they cut every 2 weeks. I also think about edible arrangements. Edible arrangements, right, is designing fruit baskets. Edible arrangements sells $500 million worth of fruit baskets every single year. $500 million. Right. Mm-hmm. So we get so caught up in these sexy jobs, right, and these sexy titles of be a doctor, be a lawyer, etc. And there are literally businesses that are under our noses that could be extremely profitable, but because they're not sexy and other people might look at them in a funny way, we don't pursue them and we don't execute them. Why haven't we actually dominated the laundromat? We're the ones without laundry in our homes because we're renting out apartments. Why haven't we dominated the laundromat business? Why haven't we dominated the nail salon? Why haven't we dominated the hair and beauty supply stores, right? The only thing that we really dominated is the salons and the barbershops in our community. But there are all these businesses in our community that are consistent, and it's just weird why there's no chain. If we're going to have liquor stores in our community, why don't they be black liquor stores? There shouldn't just be a black barber, a black salon, and a black bookstore. That's literally all we have: a black barber, a black salon, black bookstore, and a soul food restaurant. That's all. That's as far as it goes for us, and I just know that there's more available to us.
Yeah. It was almost like our culture got shifted, and we almost got duped into slavery. Basically, you get we got some. And it's that whole talk about integration and sort of misrepresenting what progress actually looks like. And I think that we were somehow led to believe that progress meant being accepted into institutions that were run and owned by other people, and
Yeah.
we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what ownership means and why ownership is so important. And you're right, when you talk about edible arrangements, that to me is that's that mean money that comes through multiplication. Multiplication means, I'm selling these baskets $50 a pop. If I sell 1,000 baskets this week, I make $50,000 this week. And that to me is what I want. I'm teaching my kids, but multiplication. We don't even talk about hourly wages and all that. We talk about multiplication. Look, if you have that the unit costs this much and you want to make this much money, you sell this many units, and boom, you're gonna make that much money. And time is taken out of the equation. It's not like, okay, I got to work 3,000 hours to make this much money. It's like, no, you can make that much money in 30 seconds if you have the right system in place.
Yeah, and so I just think